Elena always knew her father had a problem with cards and dice, but she never thought it would destroy her life. Every night, she heard him sneaking out after dinner, telling her mother he was going to meet friends. But Elena knew better. The smell of cigarettes and cheap alcohol that followed him home. The way his hands shook when he counted the grocery money. The phone calls that made him pale and nervous. These were not signs of friendly gatherings. At 24, Elena worked at 2 different places just to keep food on the table. During the day, she served coffee and sandwiches at a small cafe downtown. At night, she cleaned offices in the business district. Her younger brother David was smart, really smart, and she wanted him to go to college. Their mother had been sick for years, and the medical bills kept growing. Between David's school fees and mother's medicines, Elena barely had time to sleep, let alone think about her own dreams. Her father Miguel used to be different. Elena remembered when she was little, how he would come home from his construction job with dirty hands but a big smile. He would lift her up and spin her round, calling her his little princess. But that was before the accident that hurt his back, before he lost his job, before he discovered that gambling could make him forget his pain for a few hours. The problem started small, a few dollars missing from her mother's purse, then bigger amounts. Elena noticed their nice television disappeared one day. Miguel said it was broken and he had thrown it away. But Elena saw the pawn shop receipt in his jacket pocket. Soon, their car was gone too. Miguel claimed it needed too many repairs, but Elena knew the truth. She tried talking to him many times. "Papa, please, we need that money for David's books." She would say, "Or Mama needs her medicine. You cannot take this money." But Miguel would get angry and shout that he was the man of the house, that he knew what he was doing. That one big win would solve all their problems. Elena started hiding money. She opened a secret bank account and tried to save every extra dollar she could, but it was like trying to fill a bucket with a huge hole in the bottom. No matter how hard she worked, Miguel found ways to lose more money than she could save. The phone calls got worse. At first, they were polite. Men with calm voices asking when Miguel would pay back what he owed. Then the voices became less friendly. They started calling at all hours, even when Miguel was not home. Elena learned to recognize the numbers and stopped answering, but they kept calling. One Tuesday morning, Elena was getting ready for work when she heard her mother crying in the kitchen. She ran downstairs and found her parents sitting at the table, looking terrified. Miguel was holding a letter, his hands shaking so badly he could barely read it. "What happened?" Elena asked, though she already feared the answer. Miguel looked up at her with tears in his eyes. "I owe money to some very dangerous people," he said quietly. "A lot of money, more money than we could ever pay back." Elena felt her stomach drop. "How much?" $200,000. The number hit Elena like a truck. $200,000. She made about $30,000 a year working 2 jobs. Even if she gave every single penny to these people and ate nothing, bought nothing, paid no bills, it would take her almost 7 years to earn that much. "Papa, how could you do this to us?" she whispered. Before Miguel could answer, there was a loud knock on the door. Not a normal knock, the kind of knock that means trouble. Elena's mother grabbed her arm, and they all sat frozen, hoping whoever it was would go away. The knocking got louder. Then they heard a man's voice. "Miguel Martinez, we know you are in there. Open the door. We just want to talk." Miguel stood up slowly, like an old man, though he was only 52. He walked to the door and opened it. 3 men in expensive suits walked into their small kitchen. They were polite, but Elena could see something cold and dangerous in their eyes. The man in front was tall with gray hair. He looked around their modest home and smiled, but it was not a kind smile. "Good morning, Miguel. We have been trying to reach you." "I know," Miguel said. "I just need more time." "Time?" The gray-haired man laughed. "Miguel, you have had 6 months. Our boss is not a patient man." Elena watched this conversation feeling like she was in a nightmare. These men talked about her father's debt like they were discussing the weather, but she could feel the threat in every word. "Please," Miguel said. "I have a family. I will find a way to pay. How? Another man asked. You have no job, no car, no valuable possessions. Your house is already mortgaged beyond its value. That was when the gray-haired man noticed Elena standing in the corner. His cold eyes looked her up and down, and Elena felt sick. She crossed her arms over her chest and took a step back. Actually, the man said slowly, maybe there is a way. He pulled out his phone and made a call. Elena could not hear what he was saying, but she heard him describe her, young, pretty, hard-working. After a few minutes, he hung up. Miguel, I have good news. My boss is willing to forgive your entire debt. Elena's mother gasped with relief, but Elena felt more afraid than ever. Nothing in life was free, especially not to $100,000. What do you want? Elena asked. The gray-haired man smiled at her. Smart girl. My boss needs a wife, someone respectable, someone who will make him look good in public. In exchange for this arrangement, your father's debt disappears completely. Elena felt the room spinning around her. You want me to marry a stranger. Not a stranger. A very wealthy, very powerful man. You would live in a beautiful house, have everything you could want. And if I say no? The man's smile disappeared. Let me be clear, young lady. Your father owes money to people who do not accept no for an answer. If this debt is not paid one way or another, your entire family will suffer the consequences. Elena looked at her father, hoping he would stand up, would protect her, would tell these men to leave his daughter alone. But Miguel just stared at the floor, his shoulders shaking. I need time to think, Elena said. You have until tomorrow morning, the gray-haired man replied. We will return at 10 o'clock for your answer. After the men left, Elena sat in the kitchen with her parents. Nobody spoke for a long time. Finally, Miguel started crying. I'm so sorry, he whispered. I never meant for this to happen. I thought I could win it back. I thought I could fix everything. Elena wanted to scream at him, to tell him how selfish he had been, how he had destroyed their family for his stupid gambling. But looking at her broken father, she felt only sadness. That night, Elena could not sleep. She walked around their small house, thinking about her life. She thought about David, who was only 17 and dreamed of becoming a doctor. She thought about her mother, who needed expensive treatments. She thought about the future she had. Imagined for herself, maybe going back to school, maybe finding someone to love, maybe having children of her own someday. All of that was gone now. In the morning, she would have to choose between marrying a man she had never met or watching. Her family faced terrible consequences. As the sun came up, Elena realized she had already made her choice. She was the only one who could save her family, and despite everything her father had done, she could not let them suffer. When the men returned at 10 o'clock, Elena was waiting for them, dressed in her best clothes, her chin held high. I will do it, she said simply. The gray-haired man nodded. Smart choice. The wedding is in 1 month. Use this time to prepare yourself. As the men left, Elena wondered what kind of man she was about to marry and whether she would ever be happy again. The morning of her wedding, Elena stood in front of the mirror in her childhood bedroom, wearing a simple white dress that her mother had bought from a discount store. Her hands were shaking as she tried to put on lipstick, and she had to stop 3 times because tears kept ruining her makeup. You look beautiful, Mija, her mother whispered, standing behind her with wet eyes. Elena wanted to say that she felt like she was getting dressed for her own funeral, but she just nodded and tried to smile. Through the thin walls, she could hear her father pacing in the living room, probably feeling guilty, but still relieved that his debt was disappearing. The ceremony was held in a small church downtown. Elena had imagined her wedding day so many times when she was younger. A big celebration with all her friends and family, dancing and laughter. Marrying someone who loved her as much as she loved him. Instead, she walked down the aisle alone, because her father was too ashamed to escort her, facing a man she had never even spoken to. Viktor Petrov was not what she had expected. The dangerous men who came to collect her father's debt were rough and scary. So Elena had pictured her new husband would be the same, maybe older, cruel-looking, with cold eyes and a mean smile. But Victor was different. He was tall and handsome, probably in his early 30s, with dark hair and bright blue eyes. He wore an expensive black suit that fit him perfectly, and when he looked at her walking down the aisle, his expression was serious but not unkind. During the short ceremony, Victor barely looked at her. He said his vows in a quiet, steady voice, but Elena could tell his mind was somewhere else. When it came time to kiss the bride, he leaned down and gave her the smallest, most polite kiss on her lips, so quick and formal that it felt more like a business handshake. Elena had prepared herself for the worst. She thought this man might be rough with her, might demand things from her immediately, might treat her like property he had just bought. But after the ceremony, Victor surprised her completely. "We need to talk," he said quietly as they left the church. Elena nodded, following him to a black car that was nicer than any vehicle she had ever been inside. The leather seats were soft, and everything was spotless. Victor sat on the opposite side, maintaining distance between them. "I want you to understand something," he said as the driver pulled away from the church. "I did not choose this situation any more than you did. But now that we are married, I want to make some things clear." Elena held her breath, waiting for him to tell her all the horrible things she would have to do as his wife. "You will have your own room in my house," Victor continued. "Actually, your own entire section. You will have privacy, and I will not bother you unless it is necessary for public appearances." Elena stared at him, confused. "I don't understand. I need a wife for business reasons." Victor explained. "People expect a man in my position to be settled, respectable. But I have no interest in forcing you into anything you do not want to do. Your father's debt is paid. You have fulfilled your part of the agreement just by marrying me." Elena felt like she was dreaming. "So you don't want me to be a real wife?" Victor looked out the window. "I want you to be comfortable and safe, that is all." When they arrived at Victor's house, Elena's mouth fell open. She had seen big houses in movies, but this was like a palace. The driveway was longer than her entire street back home, lined with perfect gardens and tall trees. The house itself was made of white stone, with huge windows and columns like something from a history book. Inside was even more impressive. The floors were made of marble that reflected the light from crystal chandeliers hanging from high ceilings. There were paintings on the walls that looked like they belonged in museums, and furniture that was probably worth more than her family's entire house. "Maria will show you to your rooms," Victor said, gesturing to a kind-looking older woman who appeared as soon as they entered. "Rooms?" Elena asked. "More than one. You have a bedroom, a sitting room, a private bathroom, and a small office if you want to study or work," Victor explained. "Maria manages the household staff. If you need anything, ask her." Elena followed Maria up a grand staircase, feeling like she was in a dream. Her new rooms were bigger than her family's entire house. The bedroom had a huge bed with soft pillows and blankets that looked like clouds. The bathroom had a bathtub big enough for 3 people and a shower with glass walls. The sitting room had comfortable chairs, a television, and shelves full of books. "Mr. Petrov said to give you this," Maria said, handing Elena an envelope. Inside was a credit card with Elena's new name on it and a note written in careful handwriting. "This is for whatever you need or want. There is no limit, and you do not need to ask permission to use it." The fifth Elena sank into one of the soft chairs, staring at the credit card. She had never owned a credit card in her life. She had always lived paycheck to paycheck, counting every dollar, buying only what was absolutely necessary. "Is he always this generous?" Elena asked Maria. Maria smiled. "Mr. Petrov is a good man. He has been alone in this big house for too long. Maybe having you here will make him happier." That evening, Victor knocked on Elena's door. She had spent the afternoon exploring her new rooms and trying on the expensive clothes that had been delivered while she was looking around. "I wanted to check if you need anything," he said, standing politely in the doorway without entering her private space. "Why are you doing this?" Elena asked. "Being so kind to me. You could have demanded anything you wanted." Victor was quiet for a moment. because your father's mistakes are not your fault. You did not choose to be here any more than I chose to need a wife for business purposes. We are both trapped by circumstances, but that does not mean we have to make each other miserable." Elena studied his face, trying to understand this confusing man. What kind of business requires you to have a wife? The kind where people judge you based on your personal life as much as your professional success, Victor said. "I have meetings with very traditional clients who expect their business partners to be family men. A bachelor in my position raises questions I would rather not answer. So this is all pretend? In public, we will act like a normal married couple. In private, you are free to live your own life. You can continue your education if you want. You can pursue any interests you have. You can even work if that makes you happy, though you certainly do not need to for financial reasons." Elena felt tears starting in her eyes, but this time they were not tears of sadness. For the first time in months, maybe years, she felt something like hope. "I always wanted to go to college," she said quietly. "I wanted to study literature, maybe become a teacher." "Then you should do that," Victor said simply. "I will arrange for you to meet with admissions counselors at the best universities in the city." After Victor left, Elena sat on her new bed, trying to process everything that had happened. This morning, she had woken up expecting the worst day of her life. Instead, she found herself in a beautiful home with a man who seemed determined to give her opportunities she had never dreamed possible. She called her mother to let her know she was safe and well. She could hear the relief in her mother's voice and the guilt in her father's background apologies. As Elena fell asleep that first night in her new life, she wondered what secrets Victor was hiding behind his kind eyes and whether this strange arrangement might somehow turn into something neither of them had expected. 3 months had passed since Elena's strange wedding, and she had settled into a routine that still felt like a dream. Every morning, she woke up in her beautiful bedroom, ate breakfast prepared by the house chef, and then spent her days studying. Victor had kept his promise about college, and she was now taking online courses to prepare for university entrance exams. The house had become familiar to her, though she still discovered new rooms every week. There was a library with thousands of books, a music room with a grand piano, and even a small movie theater. Victor had told her she was free to explore anywhere except his private office and bedroom wing, and Eleanor respected those boundaries. Their interactions were polite but distant, twice a week. They shared dinner together, making small talk about her studies or current events. Sometimes Victor asked about her family, and Eleanor appreciated that he had quietly arranged for her mother to receive better medical care and for David to attend a private school. When she tried to thank him, Victor would just nod and change the subject, as if kindness was simply his normal way of being. On weekends, they attended social events together, business dinners, charity fundraisers, art gallery openings. Eleanor learned to play the role of a devoted wife, smiling and making pleasant conversation with Victor's associates. She noticed how people treated Victor with a mixture of respect and fear, how conversations stopped when he approached, how everyone seemed eager to please him. It made her curious about what exactly Victor did for work, but she never asked. Eleanor had started to feel genuinely grateful for her situation. Yes, she was in an arranged marriage, but Victor treated her better than many women were treated by men who claimed to love them. She had security, education opportunities, and freedom she had never experienced before. Sometimes she even caught herself thinking that maybe the strange arrangement could work long-term. But she also noticed things about Victor that made her wonder what he was hiding. He worked very late hours, often not coming home until after midnight. She sometimes heard him talking on the phone in languages she did not recognize, his voice tense and serious. There were days when he looked exhausted, with dark circles under his eyes, as if he had not slept at all. Victor never talked about his past, his family, or his feelings. Eleanor had tried asking casual questions during their dinners, but he always deflected with questions about her own life. She knew he was 32 years old and had built his business empire over the past decade, but everything else about him was a mystery. One Thursday evening, Elena was supposed to attend her online literature class, but the professor had sent an email saying he was sick and had to cancel. Elena was disappointed because she really enjoyed these classes, but she decided to use the extra time to read in the library. As she walked through the main hallway toward the library, she heard something that made her stop. It was a sound she had never heard in the house before, a low moan of pain, like someone was hurt. The sound was coming from the direction of Victor's private wing. Elena stood frozen, listening. There it was again, definitely someone in distress. Her first thought was that maybe Victor had fallen and injured himself, or maybe someone had broken into the house and hurt him. Despite their formal relationship, Elena had grown to care about Victor's well-being. He had been nothing but kind to her, and she could not ignore the possibility that he needed help. She walked quietly toward Victor's wing, following the sounds. The closer she got, the more concerned she became. She could hear Victor's voice now, talking to himself in what sounded like a conversation with someone who was not there. Elena reached Victor's bedroom door, which was slightly open. She raised her hand to knock, but what she saw through the gap made her freeze completely. Victor was sitting on the edge of his bed, shirtless, with his back toward the door. But it was not Victor's state of undress that shocked Elena. It was what she saw on his skin. His back and sides were covered with terrible scars, some old and faded, others that looked more recent. There were marks that looked like burns, long, thin lines that could only have come from knives, and round scars that Elena realized with horror must have come from cigarettes. Victor was carefully applying medicine to a scar on his shoulder that he could barely reach. His face was twisted with pain, not just physical pain, but emotional pain that Elena could see even in profile. He was talking quietly to himself, and Elena realized he was practicing conversations, the kind of normal, casual talk that people have at dinner parties. "How's your business doing, Victor?" he said in a normal voice. Then he answered himself in the same polite tone. "Very well, thank you for asking. We have been expanding into new markets." He paused, winced as he touched a particularly bad scar, then continued, "And how is married life treating you?" Another pause. "Elena is wonderful. I am very fortunate." Elena felt her heart breaking as she watched this strong, mysterious man practicing how to pretend his life was normal. She realized that Victor was not hiding cruelty or criminal activity from her. He was hiding pain and trauma that ran so deep he could barely function in social situations. Without rehearsing every word, as Victor reached for a bottle of medicine on his nightstand, he turned slightly and saw Elena's reflection in the mirror across the room. Their eyes met in the glass, and Elena saw an expression she would never forget. It was not anger at her invasion of his privacy, not embarrassment at being seen without a shirt. It was pure shame and vulnerability. For a long moment, they just looked at each other in the mirror. Elena could see tears starting in Victor's eyes, and she felt her own tears beginning to fall. This man who everyone treated with fear and respect, who lived in a mansion and commanded such power, was sitting alone in his room every night, tending to scars from torture that must have been unimaginable. "I am sorry," Elena whispered. "I heard sounds and thought you might be hurt. I was worried about you." Victor turned around slowly, not bothering to hide his scars anymore. Up close, Elena could see even more damage, marks on his chest, a scar along his collarbone, evidence of violence that spoke to a past she could never have imagined. "Now you know," Victor said quietly. "This is why I live alone. This is why I needed a wife for appearances only. This is why I cannot be a real husband to anyone." Elena stepped into the room without permission, moved by an impulse she did not fully understand. "Who did this to you?" "People who wanted to hurt my father through me," Victor said. "I was 22, just graduated from college, planning to work in my father's business. They took me for 6 months. By the time my father found me, I was..." He stopped, unable to continue. Elena sat down on the chair across from Victor's bed, not caring about propriety or boundaries anymore. "Is that why you understand? Why you have been so kind to me?" Because you know what it feels like to have your choices taken away? Victor nodded, still holding the medicine bottle in his shaking hands. I know what it is like to be trapped by someone else's decisions. I know what it is like to have your life controlled by forces you cannot fight. In that moment, Elena understood. Everything. Victor's late nights were not about criminal activities. They were about sleepless nights filled with nightmares. His formal distance was not coldness. It was protection against getting too close to anyone. His need for a wife for appearances was not about business networking. It was about creating a normal facade to hide the broken man underneath. You do not have to hide from me, Elena said softly. I will not judge you or pity you or treat you differently. We are both survivors, Victor. Maybe we can help each other heal. For the first time since Elena had known him, Victor smiled, not the polite, careful smile he wore in public, but a real smile that reached his eyes and made him look like the young man he had been before his world was destroyed. After that night, when Elena discovered Victor's scars, everything changed between them. The next morning, Elena knocked softly on Victor's door, carrying a breakfast tray that Maria had prepared. She found him sitting by the window, already dressed for work but looking tired, as if he had not slept at all. I brought you breakfast, Elena said simply, setting the tray on his coffee table. Victor looked surprised. You do not need to take care of me, Elena. I know I don't need to, she replied, sitting in the chair across from him. But I want to. We are both alone in this big house, both dealing with situations we never chose. Maybe we can be less alone. Together, over the following weeks, they began to spend more time in each other's company. Victor started working from home more often, setting up his laptop in the library while Elena studied for her college entrance exams. They would work in comfortable silence, occasionally sharing a smile or asking each other questions about their tasks. Elena learned that Victor was incredibly intelligent. He spoke 5 languages fluently and had degrees in both business and international law. He had built his company from almost nothing after his father's death, turning a small import business into a major international corporation. But Elena also noticed how he flinched when phones rang unexpectedly, how he always sat with his back to the wall in restaurants, how he checked locks twice before going to bed. One evening, Victor found Elena crying over her textbooks in the library. She had been struggling with advanced mathematics, feeling frustrated and stupid compared to the other students in her online courses. What is wrong? Victor asked, sitting beside her on the couch. I'm not smart enough for this, Elena said, wiping her eyes. These other students went to good schools their whole lives. I worked in cafes and cleaned offices. I did not belong in college. Victor looked at her math problems and then spent the next 2 hours patiently explaining concepts that Elena had been struggling with for days. He was a natural teacher, breaking down complex ideas into simple steps that made perfect sense. You are one of the smartest people I have ever met, Victor told her as they finished the last problem. Intelligence is not about where you went to school. It is about how you think, how you solve problems, how you keep trying even when things are difficult. You have survived things that would break other people, and you are still fighting to build a better life. That takes more intelligence than any textbook can teach. Elena felt her heart skip a beat at the warmth in Victor's voice. This was not the polite, distant man she had married. This was someone who truly saw her and valued her for who she was. As the weeks passed, Victor began to open up about his past. He told Elena about his childhood, how his father had worked hard to build a successful business, how Victor had been studying abroad when his father received threats from competitors who wanted to destroy their family company. They took me to send a message to my father, Victor explained one night as they sat in the garden after dinner. They wanted him to sell his business for almost nothing, to give up everything he had worked for. When he refused, they decided to break him by breaking me. Elena listened without interrupting, letting Victor share his story at his own pace. She learned that Victor had been held captive for 6 months, tortured not just physically but mentally, as his captors tried to destroy his spirit along with his body. The worst part was not the pain, Victor said quietly. It was the helplessness. Knowing that my father was suffering too. Knowing that innocent employees at our company were losing their jobs because of the chaos. Knowing that I could end everyone's pain by convincing my father to give up. But I also knew that if we gave in to these people, they would just find new ways to hurt us and others. How did you survive? Elena asked. I made myself to promises, Victor said. First, then if I lived through this, I would make sure no one could ever have that kind of power over me again. Second, that I would never use my power to hurt innocent people the way I had been hurt. Elena began to understand why Victor had built such walls around himself. Why he lived like a fortress. Why he needed a marriage that looked normal from the outside but required nothing emotionally. From him, he had been broken so completely that the only way he could function was by keeping everyone at a safe distance. But Elena also saw glimpses of the man Victor had been before his trauma. When he helped her with homework, when he asked about her family, when he quietly arranged for David to receive a scholarship to the best private school in the city. She saw kindness and generosity that came from genuine caring, not just guilt or obligation. Victor, in turn, was amazed by Elena's strength. He watched her study late into the night, determined to catch up on the education she had missed while working to support her family. He saw how she called her mother every day, how she worried about David's happiness at his new school, how she carried the weight of her family's problems without complaining. You are extraordinary, Victor told her one evening when she was frustrated about a difficult assignment. Most people in your situation would be bitter, angry at the world, angry at me for the circumstances that brought you here. But you have turned this situation into an opportunity to build the life you always wanted. I was angry at first, Elena admitted. Angry at my father for gambling away our future. Angry at you for being part of that world. Angry at myself for not being strong enough to find another solution. But anger is exhausting, and it does not change anything. I decided I would rather use my energy to create something good from this situation. Their conversations became deeper and more personal. Victor shared his fears about his business, his worries about staying legitimate while dealing with people who were not always honest, his struggle to honor his father's memory while building something different. Elena talked about her dreams of becoming a teacher, her hopes for David's future, her guilt about leaving her parents to deal with their problems alone. One night, Victor found Elena on the terrace, looking at the stars and crying softly. What is it? He asked, sitting beside her on the bench. I got a letter today, Elena said. I have been accepted to the university. Full scholarship. Everything paid for. I can start classes next month. That is wonderful news, Victor said. Why are you crying? Because a year ago, this was impossible. I was working 2 jobs, trying to keep my family fed, dreaming about college, but knowing it would never happen. Now, because of this strange marriage, because of your kindness, I have opportunities I never imagined. I feel guilty for being happy about something that came from such a painful situation. Victoria reached over and took Elena's hand, the first time he had touched her since their wedding day. His hand was warm and strong, and Elena felt a flutter of something she had not expected to feel for this man, who had started as a stranger. Elena, Victor said softly, we did not choose how we met, but we can choose what we do with the time we have together. You deserve every opportunity you get, and you have earned every success through your own hard work and determination. Do not feel guilty for making the best of a difficult situation. As Elena looked into Victor's eyes, she realized that somewhere along the way, her feelings toward him had changed completely. This was no longer just a business arrangement or a debt being paid. This was 2 wounded people helping each other heal, 2 lonely souls finding comfort in unexpected companionship. But Elena also knew that Victor was still afraid to let anyone get too close, still convinced that he was too damaged to deserve love or happiness. She wondered if there would ever come a time when he would trust her enough to let down his walls completely, and whether she was brave enough to risk her heart on a man who might never be able to love her back. 6 months after Elena had started university classes, she noticed Victor becoming more tense and worried than usual. He spent longer hours locked in his office, took phone calls at strange hours, and sometimes forgot to eat the meals Maria prepared for him. Elena could see the stress lines around his eyes getting deeper, and she knew something serious was happening with his business. One evening, Elena found Victor sitting in his study, staring at legal documents spread across his desk. His hands were shaking slightly, and she could see the exhaustion in every line of his body. "What is wrong?" Elena asked, closing the door behind her and sitting in the chair across from his desk. Victor looked up at her with tired eyes. "Some people from my past have decided to cause problems for me. They are trying to connect me to illegal activities that happened before I took over my father's business. The police are investigating, and if they find what they are looking for, I could lose everything." Elena felt her stomach drop. "Are you guilty of what they are accusing you of?" "No," Victor said firmly. "I have worked very hard to make sure my business is completely legal. But my father's generation did business differently, and some of his old partners are angry that I refuse to continue their methods. They are trying to destroy me by making it look like I'm still involved in their activities." Over the next few weeks, Elena watched Victor struggle with the investigation. Federal agents came to the house, searching through files and asking questions. Victor's business partners started avoiding him, afraid that being associated with him would hurt their own companies. Elena saw how this affected Victor, not just professionally but personally. He started having nightmares again, waking up in the middle of the night, reliving the trauma from his captivity years earlier. Elena made a decision that surprised even herself. Instead of staying out of Victor's business problems, she decided to help him. She used her outsider status as an advantage, reaching out to wives of Victor's business associates, explaining the situation in simple terms that other people could understand. "My husband is not the man his father was," Elena told Mrs. Chen, the wife of one of Victor's biggest clients, over coffee. "He has spent years trying to build something honest and good. The people trying to destroy him are the same ones who hurt him before, who want to punish him for refusing to be like them." Elena's honesty and genuine belief in Victor's character began to change people's minds. She was not a polished businesswoman or a society wife who knew all the right things to say. She was just a young woman who truly believed in her husband's goodness, and her sincerity was more convincing than any professional defense could have been. But the real test came when Victor's enemies decided to target Elena directly. She was walking to her car after evening classes at the university when two men approached her in the parking garage. They were not the same men who had come to collect her father's debt, but Elena recognized the same dangerous energy. "Elena Petrov," one of them said with a cold smile, "your husband has been very stubborn about cooperating with our friends. Maybe you can convince him to be more reasonable." Elena felt the same fear she had experienced the day her father's debt collectors came to their house, but this time she also felt something else: anger. These people had already destroyed so much of Victor's life, and now they wanted to use her to hurt him even more. "My husband does not negotiate with criminals," Elena said, trying to keep her voice steady, "and neither do I." The men laughed. "Such a brave little wife. But bravery will not protect you if Victor continues to refuse our generous offers." Elena went straight home and told Victor what had happened. She had never seen him so angry. His face went completely white, and for a moment, Elena saw a flash of the dangerous man he could have become if he had chosen a different path. "They will not touch you," Victor said, his voice deadly quiet. "I will end this now, no matter what it costs me." But Elena surprised him again. "No, Victor. Running away or giving in to them is exactly what they want. We fight this the right way, together." Elena convinced Victor to work with the federal investigators instead of trying to handle the situation alone. She helped him organize all the documents that proved his business was legitimate, and she stood by his side during every interview and court appearance. The investigation took months, but eventually the truth came out. Victor's enemies had been using his father's old business connections to launder money and transport illegal goods, forging Victor's signature on documents and using his company's reputation to hide their activities. When Victor's cooperation with authorities led to several arrests, Elena realized how much courage it had taken for him to trust the legal system that he had once believed would never protect him. On the day the charges against Victor were officially dropped, Elena found him sitting in the garden where they had shared so many conversations. But instead of looking relieved, he looked sad. "What is wrong?" Elena asked. Sitting beside him on their favorite bench, "It is over. You are free." Victor turned to look at her, and Elena saw something in his eyes she had never seen before, complete vulnerability mixed with something that looked like love. "Elena, I need to tell you something," Victor said. "When we got married, I promised you that this was just a business arrangement, that you would be free to live your own life. You have kept your part of that agreement perfectly. You have been kind to me, helpful, supportive, even when you did not have to be. But I have not kept my promise to you." Elena felt her heart begin to race. "What do you mean?" "I mean that somewhere along the way, I stopped thinking of you as just my wife on paper. I stopped being able to imagine my life without you in it. I started falling in love with you, even though I promised myself I would never put you in that position." Elena stared at Victor, hardly believing what she was hearing. "Victor, I know this complicates everything," Victor continued quickly. "I know you never signed up for a real marriage, and I would understand if you want to leave now that the investigation is over. I can give you a divorce. Make sure you have enough money to live comfortably while you finish school. You do not owe me anything." Elena reached over and took Victor's face in her hands, the same way she had wanted to do so many times during their months of growing friendship. "Victor, do you think I helped you fight those people just because I felt obligated to? Do you think I worried about you, took care of you, stood by you through all of this just because of some business arrangement?" Victor's eyes widened as he began to understand what Elena was telling him. "I fell in love with you too," Elena said softly. "Not with the man who paid my father's debt, but with the man who helped me with my homework, who made sure my family was taken care of, who trusted me enough to share his pain. I fell in love with your kindness, your strength, your determination to be better than the people who hurt you." When Victor kissed her this time, it was nothing like their polite wedding kiss. It was the kiss of a man who had finally allowed himself to hope for happiness, kissing a woman who had chosen to love him not because she had to, but because she wanted to. 6 months later, they had a second wedding, this one a real celebration with Elena's family, Victor's few close friends, and all the people who had supported them through their difficult times. Elena wore a dress she had chosen herself, walked down an aisle covered in flowers, and married the man she loved by choice rather than obligation. As they danced at their reception, Elena thought about how strange life could be. A year and a half ago, she had thought her wedding day would be the end of her dreams. Instead, it had been the beginning of a love story she never could have imagined, to broken people who had helped each other heal, finding happiness in the most unexpected place.